Herkese hoş geldiniz demek istiyorum.
Welcome, everyone, and for those of our participants watching us online, welcome. Well, this is the second panel of the series organized under the scope of the project called Utilizing Digital Technology for Social Cohesion, Positive Messaging and Peace by Boosting Collaboration, Exchange and Solidarity. And we will talk about today the different approaches to combating disinformation. We have a new law that was recently enacted, the law number 56 and 51, and Hrant Foundation is working hard on these issues, but combating disinformation can take place only through the means of criminal law. So we will take a look, is it really an effective struggle? We will talk about data literacy, and we have to talk about different alternatives to combat disinformation. For the dissemination of disinformation, can we actually use bots to overcome the impact of this new law? Can we make use of data journalism? What will be the new approaches in the upcoming period? So these will be the questions that we will try to tackle with our panelists. Well, none of our panelists need introduction, but as the moderator, I have to introduce our panelists. Dr. Onur Varol is an assistant professor at the Sabancı University Faculty of Engineering and Natural Sciences. His research focuses on developing techniques to analyze online behaviors to improve individual well-being and address societal problems using online data. He was awarded Young Scientists Awards by the Turkish Scene Academy, and he developed different systems that identify and detect social bots on Twitter. And tonight, he will be with us. And we also have, of course, joining us online, our next speaker, lawyer Kerem Altıparmak. He is a lawyer, a human rights defender, and a professor for a long time. He is currently a member of the Ankara Bar Association, and he's working together with Yaman Akdeniz, and he made successful appeals to the Turkish Constitutional Court to get YouTube and Twitter bans lifted in 2014, and he won different cases before the European Court of Human Rights. And then we have our next speaker, Pınar Dağ, who works as a lecturer in the new media department of Kadir Has University. She is the co-founder of the Data Literacy Association and Data Journalism Platform Turkey. She has been working in the fields of data literacy, open data, data visualization, and data journalism. And for the last 3 years, she has been taking part as the pre-jury of Sigma Data Journalism Awards for 2 years. We can start with you, Mr. Onur. Yes, thank you.
Önce ekran paylaşımı yapacağım. Şöyle yapsam da. Merhabalar tekrardan, iyi akşamlar herkese. Ben bugün bir
Hello everyone and good evening. I will talk about the social networks and struggle or combating social bots. It's a very difficult area to detect. So we have some convincing ideas and some examples of different situations through which I will try to explain the situation. First of all, what do we do on social bots? The research on social bots has accelerated in the last decade. We have, since 2014, a system that is in place. We have other systems like Foxy, Hoxie, and BotSlayer. Any hashtag or a link or an information about a user, how they spread over the network is visualized through these systems. I'm also working on this. Another thing we can do is making research about the different use cases of bots. Bots can be used for some content, real content, disinformation, or any marketing purpose or spam content. These are used for these purposes, and we know this. This is the initial use case of the bots on social networks. But today we also have different and new use cases. For instance, different information is used in competition. A piece of information you share if there is any contradictory discourse with that, might be in competition in social media with another argument. And then the third use case is the amplification. To what extent can you really amplify this by just retweeting a wrong or false tweet? And the third thing is that until June next year, we have the upcoming elections in our country. So political party and voters' behaviors might be subject to some manipulation through social media and bots. Again, for some unvulnerable groups on social media, bots can be used to target and attack these vulnerable groups. And as we have Pınar here, we can also talk about journalism, because it has an important role in the field of journalism. It creates a positive feedback mechanism. Something you post and share can be liked by some people, and then positive content can be generated, or some negative posts and contents you share can also be amplified through the use of bots. So when we look at disinformation mechanisms, by using bots, we can say that it's mainly the fake users or fake followers, let's say, to gain popularity. And if you have fake followers, you can use them to be more popular. We have seen it in the pandemic. We also have some people who introduced themselves as physicians, although that was not the case, and they were very active on social media in terms of this anti-vaccine campaign. They created social media groups, positioned themselves smartly on the network, and tried to spread their discourses. And then bots are used to create targeted followers and interaction. And then management of perceptions through coordinated activities can be done through bots. Maybe a portion of the account is managed through automation, so that people will decide which accounts to follow, which accounts to unfollow, and sometimes there might be a certain script to coordinate all these things, and this is very difficult to identify these things compared to identifying the single bot accounts. And in Turkey, we also see the manipulation of social media trends and trending topics of Turkey might change. For instance, we see trending topics such as accounts for sale on Twitter. So Twitter is becoming like a marketplace in a way. Another question we can ask is the definition of a bot. What is a bot? There might be different definitions. One of the definitions I prefer is that any account that is controlled by a software on social network is considered as a bot. Maybe not 100% controlled, but maybe the content is generated by real persons, but who to follow, which message to like or dislike might be subject to automation. For instance, network automation, and for dialogues, deep learning purposes, which is a widespread thing nowadays, can be used for this. To what extent you can answer the posts of a person in a good or bad way might be assessed, or automation or timing of the interaction. For instance, if you create a system to post a certain message every morning at 9 a.m., this account might also be considered as a bot account. Again, it's also about managing the interaction, choosing which accounts to retweet, and then it's also used for copying the profiles. There might be similar profiles, accounts created using your photos or content, trying to replicate your position. So for bot detection, it's not like a black and white function. There might be different colors in between. An account for an account, we can create a risk score based on different factors. Maybe the content is automatically generated, the strategies might be different. It's not like we can clearly say this account is 100% bot account. It's more important for us to be able to understand to what level they are using automation. In many parts of the world, politics is trying to be influenced by bot accounts. In the recent years, we are looking at specific countries, and there are general survey activities to come up with generalizations. The use of bots in election campaigns by a certain political party is something that we hear more and more often. Some of them are really measurable and proven, but for some others we need more detailed research and information. So the existence of bots is widely accepted in the online discourse. And these bots have certain strategies. In 2016, for the American presidential elections, we had a research and we came up with some important messages. We were looking at news sources for low credibility news sources and popular ones, and the news spread on these resources were analyzed. For news sources with less reliability, we see that these accounts are retweeting the posts more often, instantly, so that they actually try to create a sense of reliability. Thank you. I would like to apologize. I was fast, so I will apologize to the interpreters. So, something that the bots are doing is that instantly they repost the posts of accounts with less reliability, and they try to create an impact in the initial phase. Another thing is, by the way, this is more worrying, is that human tweets per news item ratio. Initially, the bot accounts share these posts to make them more popular, and then people start believing in the authenticity of these news, and then they also get engaged in the interaction. So people also participate in the spread out of these low credibility accounts. So on the X axis, you see the bot score of a retweeter, and on the Y-axis, you see the bot score of the tweeter, the person who generates the content. So when we look at the scores, we see that the majority is composed by the tweeters, the people who generate the content. And people really believe in the authenticity of the false news or fake news, and we share it. So it's our responsibility as well, because we also share these news and retweet them. So our data literacy is very important. The trainings we receive in this field is important. This was an important message and outcome of the research actually. Another strategy we observe is the timing strategy they have. For instance, if within the first 10 seconds of the content creation, the bots try to popularize the tweets. It's initially very hard to believe, but we have seen it time and again in the 2016 elections, because Donald Trump has proven us wrong. Bots are targeting people. If they hashtag or if they hashtag a certain fake piece of information, and if they retweet it again and again, maybe 50 million people will be able to see this. So people with high number of followers and with high visibility shouldn't fall prey to such strategies. We thought that would be the case, but in the elections we were proven wrong again, especially in the Republican Party. This is a very high rate. Again, for online journalists, we had a research. Popular journalists were really followed to a large extent by bot accounts. Another study showed this to us. So this is very critical and an important problem for online journalism, because you have to make sure that the feedback you receive on your posts do not come from bots, but come from real accounts. This is an interesting visual. Similar ones will be created for the upcoming election period. So here you see a political leader from Turkey, actually, with 50,000 fake followers. We made this analysis by the end of 2019. You might guess who this person is in real life because of their real number of followers. But on Y-axis, we have seen all the followers along the timeline, and on the vertical axis, y-axis, this is the account creation time statistics, and the colors show to what extent these accounts are people, real people, or fake accounts or bots. Blue ones are people, and the other color is more like bot accounts. This portion, there is an interesting pattern actually. If you're also trying to understand what it is, let me explain you what. In 2015, this account was highly followed by bot accounts. About 60,000 followers were initially there, but very soon the number of followers increased to 100,000 followers. Let's see who followed the account. Most of the accounts that were following this account were created between 2013 and 16. They were already created 2-3 years ago. They were ready and waiting there, and they started following this account immediately. And when we look at the bot score, they all have very high bot scores. So this is very interesting example from Turkish politics. About journalism, we also had a study, and similar analyses were made and tried for different accounts. Here we tried to choose people with highly organic followers. So the blue part in the bottom figure shows the accounts that have higher rate of human followers. And interestingly, from a Saudi journalist, this account has been created in 2016. By the end of that year, about 30,000 bot accounts started following the account. All these accounts have high bot scores. They were created within a very short period of time. And interestingly, we have seen that this account has a verified status. It has a blue tick gained by Twitter. It has a seal of approval. Sometimes the person themselves or a friend or a relative might also add fake followers. For instance, here in this process, from shifting 10,000 followers to 15,000 followers, this account has added 5,000 fake followers immediately. But is it really benefiting these accounts when they have these fake followers? Or are they really there to attack other accounts? We have to make the distinction between the two, because in the new law in Turkey, especially for bot-related issues, there might be scenarios open for interpretation. Having detailed analysis here, checking the bots coming from one single account is not the only important thing, but we have to check other things as well. Let's think about a scenario with equal number of human followers, but one account has more number of bot followers. And the scenario allows us to come up with two different interpretations. You might think that the account has both these bot accounts by itself. This might seem like a natural interpretation, but the second interpretation might be that the account with higher number of followers might have been targeted by the bot accounts to target the account by mentioning their posts through negative posts. Another scenario which is very interesting for me is the following. And it's very interesting for the law, and we need to pay attention to this topic. The bots, there might be a scenario where the bots are being followed by others. In this scenario, we have 3 followers in total, 2 human, 1 bot. Maybe these 3 followers are followed by another entity or another group. One interpretation might be that bot followers are there for support. That might be a logical scenario. And the second reason might be that this might be a planned activity to reduce the credibility of the account. So there might be someone who is orchestrating this, the entity you see with the hat and sunglasses. So maybe for people who are competent enough to analyze this account, they might go and say, see, this account has bot followers, analyze this, and that would be the case. So maybe they are designing this just to smear the credibility of the account, a true account. So when we analyze the data, we see that we need to be open for both scenarios, and we need to be very careful before jumping to conclusions, because we need to work as a devil's advocate to analyze these things. A third element is also possible. We can talk about the activities of the people themselves, or there might be the activities of ill-intended entities, entity, person, whatever we might call it. Or there might be Twitter's own activity. We have some system-based biases generated automatically by Twitter. I had a test a few days ago. I attended a conference in Washington on political science. I created an account one day before the conference. I got a fake phone number. I verified the account, and as interests, I wrote only politics. So when I write only politics, these are the accounts that were suggested to me by Twitter. As it was a DC account, Twitter recommended mainly Democrats. Even Elizabeth Warren has 2 accounts on this list. And then the other accounts that were recommended to me by Twitter also have the similar political spectrum. So the thing is, if I were a person creating a bot account in anywhere in the world to influence American politics, I can easily follow 5 or 10 accounts recommended to me or suggested to me by follower, randomly start following them. And Twitter also allows me to join these accounts as followers as fake accounts. So the algorithm also is making a contribution to the creation of the system. So if I were offered as suggestions equal number of Democrats and Republicans, there would be no problem. But based on my location, Twitter suggested only Democrats to me, making an emphasis on a certain political opinion. So the algorithms of Twitter itself might also be creating some biases. So this is something we need to analyze.
Sosyal medyada
Eventually, we could also ask how many social bots are available on social media. Twitter had conducted its own analysis, and these accounts analyzed were mostly commercial advertisement, and their deduction is 5%. In 2017, I conducted a study with a result of 19%. I think this is the closest estimate by far so far. And when we presented this estimate, it was very well appreciated because it turned out to be much higher than the expected rate. There are different studies conducted and to carry out this analysis, and Twitter actively started deleting ISIS accounts. There were around 50 million accounts in a couple of months, and that gave good statistics to us. But the answer is not easy to the question how many social bots are there. And you must have followed how Elon Musk tried hard to acquire Twitter. After a while he gave up, but eventually you know what happened. I was guessing Elon Musk would buy Twitter because the file was before the court, but it was difficult to present anything before the court, and before the conclusion things took a different turn. It's not very easy. It was not easy for them to reach an agreement in terms of social bots. Why? Because there is not a definitive description of what a bot is. Twitter has its own description of what bot is. Members of academia, researchers, journalists have different descriptions of it. Even if they had been able to agree on a single unique definition, there is more to it. In the data set, there could have been some deleted accounts. Maybe there were also bots they could have been counted in. And Twitter may have looked at the most recent accounts with no activities at all, or certain accounts that may not pose a risk today. So at the end of my presentation, I will talk about the data set that will be relevant. Around 1,000 account owners in relation to politics were analyzed in our study, and there are around 40 million single followers, individual followers, and around 10 million of them have no single post whatsoever. So they're just following. the other content. So whether such accounts are bots or not, it's hard to tell just by their existence, but somehow those accounts will be used. So 10 million accounts all of a sudden made decide to post a content. Of course, Twitter can't do anything about it, but it's a risk out there. It may sound pessimistic, but probably the next speakers will give you more information about the legal background of this as well. Let's take an example from California, how social bots are used. This is hard to read, I'm sorry about this. So this example is about under what circumstances it's appropriate to use bots or not, whether there is a commercial purpose or not. Is there an intention to deceive people, fool people? Because if that's the case, they shouldn't be allowed. There was a draft law that was passed, and there's a reference to our 2017 study. This is a good reference. And of course, we're in the run-up to the elections in Turkey, and for me what is important is it's important to share open data. We collect data set which is called Seçim 2023. We collect data about politics, politicians, about the profile of politicians. We also follow the social networks, and we follow the trending topics in Turkey, and we disaggregate that for each 15 minutes per each city. We check the bot accounts, and we follow the politicians' accounts in a time series in our data set, and we have a party-based analysis. We shared our outcomes once so far, and we will continue to share it on a regular basis. So anyone interested in political sciences and data will be able to benefit from that and will be able to conduct a similar analysis. We also looked at the rate of bot accounts that follow a certain politician, or what percentage of the followers of a politician are bot accounts, and the rates are quite high, sometimes between 40 to 80%. It depends. The more popular you are, the more bots follow you as an account holder. So this data set is open for anyone who's interested to analyze, and it is good to prevent disinformation. It is important to prevent the coordination of automated content sharing, and I think it will be useful for the members of academia. And we periodically publish and will continue to publish that on a monthly basis. Actually, this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Having mentioned legal framework, let's turn to Kerem Altıparmak, but just a quick reminder. You may have questions, and just so you know, we will collect all the questions at the very end after 3 speakers finish their presentation. Kerem Bey, over to you. Good evening. I'll try to share screen. Excuse me 1 second. I'll go to the beginning of my presentation. Let's see if we made the right choice. That's what I was thinking while listening to Onur during his presentation. I would pick up from where he left off. I will introduce a legal framework to this universal problem. And I would like to connect it to a local problem. And I will concentrate on the local aspect. I am sorry I'm not joining you physically. I wish we could have done this face to face, so it's a disadvantage. I won't be able to see your reactions, but please feel free to reach out to me and ask your questions after the presentation. Well, let's get started. About authoritarian regimes, there are 2 things that could be said, in addition to what is already universal, of course. Authoritarian regimes set bans on public debate and may want to determine in what direction it's going to go. There are examples of this across the world. Some people were asking whether Turkey will turn into Korea or China. So that was the thinking behind it. That's a method of authoritarian regimes. That's possible. And that happened for short periods of time after Istanbul explosion. Most recently, communication was restricted, access to social media was made impossible due to some draconian measures, and there are some vague legal bases that are used to justify, to rationalize these measures. But since the very beginning, Turkey hasn't been using such draconian measures for all the times. What they also do is, rather than restricting the social media debate, the strategy is to own the social media in and by itself altogether. This is what Turkey has been doing, has been witnessing actually. So that's the first point I'd like to say. Now, on to my second point. Referring to what Onur Bey said, this is a prevalent topic everywhere, not just in Turkey. With the appearance of social media in the world, those who had a liberal world view considered that as a miracle, because then we would be able to hear different voices, there we would be able to express ourselves freely. This is a richness, this is very good about plurality. That was the thinking of the liberal people, but I think we were wrong in that conclusion, because for many groups of people, not just those in the majority, for many people, even in those in the minority, social media turned out to be a silencing tool, didn't it? Social media is used for the following purpose. For example, how can we stop that voice being raised? How can we raise rather the other voice? So that's what's happening in social media these days, unfortunately. But yet another time, the strategy is to own the public sphere debate. Now we have the internet law, the disinformation law, that I think should be interpreted in that way. I know, of course, there are different groups in the society. They might be attacking each other, and one wants to make the other's voice silent, but for some segments of the society, how it works out is they disclaim some unpleasant voice to trigger protest among some other people. But this is happening with the government support in Turkey. This is what makes it critical. Such operations are for that reason very critical. Let's say in this example, you see two high-level figures, and one journalist had a post, Sedef Kabaş, who eventually got detained because of her post. And because of what happened to her, other people, high-level figures, also showed her as a target, unfortunately. So there were real bot accounts, fake accounts, who rained down on us with claims to make sure she should get detained. So social media eventually turned out to be a manipulation venue, not a freedom of expression venue. It has a deterrence effect. What is happening in social media, it has a deterrence effect. Those who have a dissenting voice will be deterred to raise their voices. Let's take a look at other examples. Famous singer Gülşen said something in a concert, and because of what she said during the concert, months later she was detained because of what she said in that concert. Eventually she got detained. Or Fincancı, Şebnem Fincancı is another case here. Similar thing happened to her. She said something that was not to the liking of the majority of the population, not liking to the government. It was out of question. So it was not actually, she was not supposed to say that. And she was attacked, truly. It's, by the way, not just about social media. Of course, this is happening elsewhere in other venues. But what makes social media more important is such a pressure is exerted on a certain group in the population, and when it's happening on social media, it also triggers the legal action. So social media is not supporting pluralism. On the contrary, it's silencing some groups, and it is growing with a multiplier effect because legal tools are in place now in social media. So I have given you several examples that also present themselves with different anomalies. For example, there are some celebrities who is so busy systematically bringing files against some contents posted on social media. These are usually pro-government celebrities who derive income out of what they do. All they do is bring files before the courts. There are tens of thousands of slander cases or defamation cases. How they do it? They do it by making those mechanisms function. So in a sense, this is how the public debate slowly disappears. Remember the headline of my presentation? The headline of my presentation was the last nail in the coffin, because we see the shrinking of the civil space, shrinking of the civilian space. So this information law is just the final blow to it. But if one wants to truly understand it, I should explain it in the least technical way possible so everyone can understand it. So I'd like to remind you of some legal tools that are available in Turkey. There's an information stream in the internet, right? And there is a despotic legal mechanism, unfortunately, in Turkey. And basically, I'm referring to 5651, the law on combating crimes committed on the internet. This law dates back to 2007. The idea was to protect children against dangerous content. That was the origin of the law, but it evolved. It had been amended 14 times. The content is much broader. It's no more talking about children anymore. There are 3 important articles in it. I mean, out of many articles, the 3 are critical, and it is quite linked to this disinformation law. The first one was Article 8. It presents you a catalog crime lists, and if there is a suspicion about the commission of such a crime, you could block access. But after December 25th, about the accusation of corruption, we started to talk about Article 8A and 9. Article 9 refers to the protection of personal rights. For example, you may sue a person if you are insulted. In the meantime, the content spreads, so there is a need to immediately intervene. That was the idea, but it is almost impossible to cover news about the government or about a prominent businessman who wins the bids of the government. How about internet journalists? Every day they are given a ban on content, given a block on access. And under Article 9, courts of first instance delivers decisions against internet journalists on the grounds that individual rights are violated. So even the simplest content could be easily blocked. Actually, even worse than that, the content is taken down and they have severe fines imposed. How about Article 8A? It refers to public order or national security. This is about prevention of a crime that hasn't been committed yet on grounds of public order and public peace. And of course, there are different examples to this, like the Istanbul explosion. Basically, just due to this article, you cannot discuss this on the social media because of this article. Remember Hacı Osman died in 2015. The body was dragged by armed vehicles, and immediately they delivered more than 600 decisions to block access, and there was investigation going on. But who was in charge of it? So coming back to 5851, this requires immediate action. And it refers to criminal law, for example, insult to the president, public officials, terrorist propaganda, denigration of Turkishness, committing a crime, although you're not a member of the organization, or aiding the terrorist organization, denigration of Turkishness, turning people against military service, and so on. The content is so broad. But it is not possible to foresee the content, and the wording is so vague. It's not clear. It's not just me who says that. By the way, European Court of Human Rights judgments are in the same line as me. So these articles are vague. They're not clear enough. They're ambiguous. So it is arbitrary. It's based on arbitrariness, their implementation. So these laws don't change, unfortunately. That's how they destroy public debate in these venues. They're not foreseeable. It is not easy to know the limits. So it's so broad, open for interpretation. Remember the Gülşen, the singer example? During the concert, what she said was, in a way, against people who were graduates of the Islamic Imam schools. And this was taken as the basis for insulting the values of the society, but that was not true actually. That ground didn't hold. So the prosecutor went ahead and said being an imam refers to a social status, so the judge took that as ground. Well, it's not possible to claim that being an imam refers to a social status, but because the wording of the law is so vague, it's possible for the prosecutor to do that.
İki örneğimiz içinde
So the same thing is true for the other two previous examples. Sedef Kabaş was actually arrested because of denigrating the president. And the other example, we have seen the person being arrested again for the same reason. So civil cases are seen. There are certain law offices, and all they do is to actually represent their clients. In these cases, they use technical tools to identify anything, any content that could be considered as defamation. And people, when they make statements against people in politics or in power, they mainly make those comments in opposition journals on the internet, Cumhuriyet Diken, etc. So you make a comment. For instance, you cover news online, and these law offices come and analyze the comments under those news pieces to see any negative comments are there, and they press charges saying that that public official was subject to defamation, they have suffered, they are victims, but the public official doesn't even know they are becoming victims. It might be a high-level public official, but these comments are unfortunately seen under the comments section of a news article published on the account of Cumhuriyet Daily, for instance. So these law officers go and find these comments and press charges. So it's really very costly to talk about that given public official. We have the Radio and Television Supreme Board, and then we have the ICT board, and we also have the Press Advertising Agency that are issuing sanctions about stopping adverts and advertorial income. So why did we have the need to come up with this new censorship law? Because there was still a small portion of the social media where you could still have a public debate. There was some room for discussion and debate. So that's the last nail on the coffin. Actually, this new censorship law is really the last nail on the coffin. So you'll no longer have any public debate opportunity. We have three main issues under the censorship law. One is the part about the criminal law, which was highly debated, but the censorship law is not only about the disinformation provision. Let's take a look at these things. In the press law, the new regulation is that, by the way, this is the carrot part that I'm talking about. It says that internet or online news portals are now subject to the press law. This seems to be something nice, right? For years, online portals wanted this because it has its positive sides as well, because this will allow for the online reporters to be issued press credentials. They will no longer have heavier working conditions, and if a miracle happens, for instance, these opposing online news portals will get the chance to receive adverts, official and commercial adverts, to generate income. But as we see in many cases, there is never a carrot without a stick. So let's take a look at the sticks. I even put the picture of a hammer here rather than a stick. So let's take a look at them. First of all, according to the press law, you make a statement, and in that statement there is a list of conditions that you need to abide by. And the public prosecutor, if they don't like what you say in your statement, they might go and apply to the court of first instance and ask you to remove the content. So you will, in terms of your obligations, be subject to the press law, and there will be a new type of obligation. However, you will not be able to benefit from any advantages of the press law. In a way, so and so that an online website is not considered as a newspaper, so you might even risk losing your press credential because of your online publication. So, and the obligation to publish retractions will be also valid for online content as well. For instance, it wasn't possible to publish any content denigrating any broadcasting agency. However, when online content is going to be subject to press law, you will not only have to remove the content, but you will also have to publish this retraction, because if it's the judge of the Criminal Court of Peace that decides for this, you will have to publish this on online portal. So if the judge of the Criminal Court of Peace decides first for the removal of content and then decide for the retraction, publication of a retraction, this will be even worse because the law allows for this. So the press credentials, the press card or credentials seem to be something very positive. So they establish a commission, and Fahrettin Altun assigns 10 members out of the total 19 members of that commission, such as it's the case for the Radio and TV Supreme Board and other Supreme Boards. So it will be the government that will be controlling this commission and thus making the decisions. So for crimes committed online, the press law also is going to see another implication on it. I didn't talk about it, but let's talk about it. The newspaper, for instance, within 4 months after covering a piece of news, if there aren't any charges pressed against the newspapers, you can't press charges later on. But for online portals, online pages, it is 4 months upon the notification of the crime. So it means you can actually press charges after 10 years of the publication of the news article. So it won't be the same practices for newspapers and online newspapers. So a second category introduced with the law is this crime of publicly spreading misleading information. I write here, what? Because the name of the article is different than the content of the paragraph under it, because in the title it says the crime of publicly spreading or disseminating misleading information, but then the article talks about wrong information or fake information. Is it the same thing? Misleading information, fake information, false information. Are they really the same thing? So, anybody's guess. That's why I say, what? Here. So, I'm not the only one who thinks that way. The Venice Commission also, as you can see, talks about a set of unforeseeable concepts. So what are these concepts? Misleading information, publicly spreading it, distorting the peace of a public institution, general health, in a convenient manner, within the framework of the activities of an institution. All these concepts, what do they mean? So the spokesperson of the government, Mahir Ünal, says, don't be afraid. 5 things have to happen for this law to come into effect. So it's very difficult, he says. So what are these elements? First of all, the news has to be false, but false according to whom? For instance, is the inflation rate 80% or not? It's false according to whom? It depends on one person to another. There is no criteria to define what reality or truth is. Based on the judicial practices in Turkey, we know that easily a judge can claim that this is not a fact, but it is something else. So again, the second criteria is that it has to be an unreal or false news that impacts the security of the country and public health. So it's for the protection of national security and public health. So if you are risking the national security, then this would be considered as false news. If the official figure says it's 80%, how come can you claim otherwise? Let's remember that after the Istanbul explosions, the public prosecutor made an announcement saying that no information should be spread apart from the official authorities. So if you spread or share any information, it will be considered as false news. However, maybe you are sharing official statistics and data. Then third element is that it says it has to have the intention to create panic, fear, and worry among people. Yes, if there was the intention to create fear and panic, we could see this. But the article doesn't say if panic or fear is created, but it says if you have the intention to create fear and panic. How will you identify this? Will you put a chip in people's brain? Will you put people in the lying machine? And the prosecutor might say that my intention is to create fear, and it will be conducive to distorting public peace. So how can we say this? Again, let's remember our first example. Even the detention or arrest of Gülşen was distortion of, due to distortion of public peace. People, graduates of Imam Hatip schools, went to the prosecutor and they said their peace was distorted. So if you say that inflation is high, then the pro-government people will say their peace is distorted because our country is doing extremely well. However, they are trying to say otherwise. So this can be considered as distortion of public peace. So if you then the fifth element is about doing these things publicly. So what is considered as public? If it's involving more than 3 people, then it's considered as public. In many cases, for accounts with very few number of followers, with no likes at all, the courts ruled for public intention. So this is even becoming more and more dangerous in terms of unforeseeability element mentioned by the Venice Commission. So maybe in the Q&A we will talk about it, but I think because of its relation with other provisions, just because of these reasons, on the election day, the internet can be totally banned. We run this risk. So, is it the end of the road? Social media was considered as the only public space where we could have some liberty, but now this will no longer be the case. The representatives of these social media companies has to be a Turkish national based in Turkey if this is a real person, and if this is an entity, legal entity, then there needs to be a company established here. So this is not the only problem. Now it's also the end of anonymity. I'm not talking about bot accounts only, but being anonymous is a right you have to enjoy. However, in the case of an investigation or a prosecution regarding these crimes, now the social media companies, through their representatives in Turkey, because they have a representative in Turkey, will have to reveal the personal ID information of people who are alleged with committing these crimes. If they don't disclose the personal information, there will be very serious sanctions. We will see it now. And the same thing is, if the social network provider learns about contents that risk the security of people, then they have to share it with the relevant law enforcement officers. We don't know who the relevant law enforcement officers are. We don't know what is the risk of life and who decides this. So you can easily see that a police station can write to a social media company thinking that they are authorized law enforcement officers, and they might ask for this information to be disclosed. If the information is not disclosed, the internet traffic of the service provider, network provider, can be slowed up to 90%. So there is no chance that this decision will not be taken. We said initially that they have banned 600,000 websites, so it's so automatic that they will easily do this. So if paragraph 16 is violated by the president of the Information Technologies Board, Communication Technologies Authority, they will be receiving a penalty up to 3% of their global income. So the social network providers will also be seeing sanctions about the publication of hashtags. So they have a liability in terms of trending topics and hashtags. If the government doesn't like the trending topics, they will be asked to take any preventive measures. So Twitter, Instagram, and other social media companies will have to do this. So it's not only about getting rid of anonymity, or it's not about taking people's right to free speech under certain crimes, but it's directly about manipulating the content without anyone knowing it. So Articles 8 and 8A, content removal measures, if they are not implemented, for instance, as we have seen, up to 90% they can do slaughtering, narrowing the bandwidth, meaning. So this is possible. And it's important because so far Twitter did not implement many of the decisions of the judges of the Criminal Court of Peace, but there was no legal sanction against this failure to implement the decisions. But if an important account targeted by the political party in power, and if that account is banned, but if Twitter is not, if Twitter doesn't implement the decision, there might be a risk that Twitter might be totally banned or closed down. We run this risk. So that small space of freedom for public debate, for public discussion, might be totally removed because of this law. And Turkey, China, Iran, or Korea, maybe Turkey did not pursue the models of these countries, but in an alternative model, Turkey is now an important example in Turkey for the other countries, and the golden shot was made through this legal amendment most recently. Thank you so much, Kerem Altıparmak. Yes, both speakers talked about a very pessimistic and gloomy picture, but I think Pınar will tell us some solutions that will give us hope. Hello everyone, let me share my presentation with you.
Bu değil mi?
Evet. Teşekkür ederim.
Başlatmamız lazım.
Sesi açtım değil mi? Tamam. Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Ne kadar...
Hello, I'll do my best to be positive. Can I do that? To what extent I can do that, I don't know. I'll do my best to be positive. Let's see how journalists have tried to find a solution to this situation. And I'll do my best not to speak fast, but usually I tend to speak fast. But I'll do my best to be slow. Let's get started. The presentation is about the importance of data in fighting disinformation. By the way, I decided to change the title of the presentation because there are different disciplines here. So I think I should name my presentation as Data Journalism and how important data journalism is in fighting disinformation. I have 18 slides, 1 minute per each slide. I'll give you examples. This is the outline of my presentation. I'll give you the description of data journalism, Sigma Awards, the method of working, examples, more examples, and references. This is the outline of my presentation. And we will take a look at the past 4 years. There are quite interesting applications from outside Turkey as well, and there are some patterns in the applications. I mean, why there is a data quality problem still in the developed and less developed countries. I will take a look at that in my presentation. I will talk about the verification methods. And I'll give you many examples from different geographic locations referring to the same problem. And I will end with a couple of humble suggestions. And I'd like to share with you some references. Maybe you may come up with an infodemia idea having listened to this presentation, so I'll give you some references. Let's get started. What's the definition of data journalism? What does a data journalist does? This person knows where the data is, collects data, and brings together the data, verifies that data, and structures and analyzes that data and visualizes that data so it turns into a news that you can cover. This is how we describe data journalism: collection of data, cleaning out data per se, visualization. So it's important to visualize so you can have access to many people. So there is a significant amount of digital content here, and we have trouble with digital data. You collect, you clean, you analyze the data, and this is the news you report in data journalism. It's easier said than done. I'm not going to bore you with technical details. In my university, I teach the students in a different way. I will do my best not to be boring here. News centers The New York Times, Washington Post, or different centers from Asia made great achievements in the past years. In each department, they have data journalism. They work for elections, so it's a growing area. But how are we going to cope with ever-growing amount of data? We talk about 2.6 terabytes, or 5 terabytes of data. How would you be able to work with that? Here's my question. You may want to answer it. Think of a leakage that you ended up with, which might have significant impact. How would you start to work with it? This influences the news agencies. Since 2006, I have came across with important leaks. So the most important thing is the structure of the data. If you have 2,000 PDF files, if you don't know how to program them, then you're stuck. So this is how data journalism was born. You should know a bit about statistics, about data modeling, about how to set up a database. So you should be able to do that in data journalism. It's not something new, of course, but the world is getting more and more digitalized, and there's ever-growing data, and it's not easy to work with that. We talk about data-driven journalism. We had the term structured journalism, but for the past 15 years, we have that as a concept. This is an important branch of journalism. Let's talk about Sigma Awards. I'm a member of the jury. I was in pre-jury, but now I'm in the jury. Every year, around 2,000 project applications we receive, and quite interesting, as I said earlier on. I would be happy to share this with you, by the way, later on. But for now, let me say, we ask 2 questions for every project application. What difficulties you encounter during data collection and what methods you use. These are the 2 most important questions we ask. What's striking is, even in the best news agency like New York Times, even them, the quality of data and data verification is troublesome, they say, or it's difficult to have enough human resources for data verification or data literacy. Even the best ones have difficulty with data verification and data literacy. So Sigma Awards, it's quite important. You can have access to the data set as well. Check this link out. Even the best news agencies, the most active ones, have difficulties, but they are making great use of these tools. Let's say Beacon newspaper ran zero cost and is able to understand our programming language. And in 5 months' time, they are able to devise a working method that will give them access to 5 million people. So data flow is so intense in this system. And what I'm telling you is actually slow journalism. Otherwise, everything else is so fast. It's never stopping. Data flows and flows non-stop. And what you're doing is not in full compliance with the ever-flowing data. Let's take a look at the France example. In France, in Germany, in data journalism departments, they're quite active. They're able to come up with a data journalism project in 2 days, but they have reached this level in 15 years. It's a teamwork, and it's very well established, well built up. What's their working method, you may wonder? There are tools. It's not about big budgets. It's open source budgets, tools. For example, a US-based center. It's important for work life. It's public. It's open source. Even a member of academia, researcher could use those tools. So it's important to understand the tools in the first place. And it's important to know about their editorial freedom, independence, having access to open data. licensing data, making it publicly available. These are important methods in the data journalism. We have cross data to prevent disinformation. It's a problem. And more important than that, reliability is an important issue. It's becoming more important. So people rely more on science-based news because people now think they shouldn't believe in anything they see because it might be misleading. So it's important to have a scientific basis for the news you cover, and it should be multidisciplinary. In terms of data verification, there are different methods. For example, the first one is checking the correctness of calculation of the data. The second one is to know how the data was collected in a news center, a data journalist working with data, sitting down, writing the data. That's not enough. So it's important to know how data collected, and it's important to verify the data. We refer to this as upskilling. So it takes more skills, but it's a teamwork eventually. Let's take a look at some examples. We don't have time to talk about each, but let me try to explain how it works. There's a prevalent concept. Don't explain people, show people. Show the content. Of course, data literacy, statistics literacy, visual literacy, they're important. And in the fight against disinformation, the biggest problem was media literacy, data literacy, and we're weak on that. So these examples tell us the following. Mapping is important. Show people how things have evolved, create associations, make it visual, and it might be faster. You may mislead people faster, but you may also make them believe in something faster. So this is a weakness. It might be a good thing to benefit from that weakness though. How about the Ukraine war crimes? There's a great example about that. We're exposed to this data a lot, right? And there are sessions about that. One was in London, who started to share videos from his room. The videos showed Russia attacking Ukraine. We thought the person was in the front of the war, but actually it was not the case. The person was sitting in his safe house in London. Well, this is a great example. There are very strong data journalism examples. There's a subdomain, Ukraine Bellingcat. This is about how civilians are destroyed, harmed. This is a subdomain, and they regularly collected data. You can see it on this website. This shows how Russia systematically deploys propaganda tools, how it twists algorithms, how it occupied the system. And it also shows how civilians are injured or killed, so there's systematic data. This is one example, quite interesting. How about the Rio example from Brazil? In Latin America, there are numerous examples, but this one is quite striking. It hits me truly. In one single year, 1,300 civilians were killed by law enforcement officers, and here's the data. Since 2013, take a look at the axis X. 2011, 12, 13, there is a decline in civilian death tolls, but otherwise it's on an increasing trend. A data journalist who's aware of the propaganda wanted to verify this information from open source data. He sets up warning systems by himself and conducts case studies, important ones, and starts to collect significant amount of data. Now, thanks to that data, international public opinion better knows how civilians are killed, and it's open for use, but the person also continues to collect data. who said he referred to forensic medicine as well, but the idea is never to give up. The person never gave up to gather data. This is such an important thing. Imagine in a country for 20 years, every year or once a year, 1,000 people die every year due to law enforcement officers. This is so important. And there is police statements and analysis too, because the police claims they're trying to protect the society from those people who died. It's such a striking example. That shows how strong and impactful data is. So it serves for the public good. There's a video here. I don't know if it works. It's a Beirut example. If the video doesn't play, it's okay. I'll try to explain it. There are 3 news centers, France-based centers. They try to verify what's happening in Beirut. They're trying to prevent disinformation. They're trying to share with us how it works out methodically. No problem if the video doesn't play. I'll just give a couple of examples. The person who is doing this has been a war journalist for quite long years, and the person started to learn how to verify the videos taken from the front. This is such an important video actually. What he did is every day he collected data on the internet. It's impressive. He collected any data, open source data verification. He conducted that too. No filtering he had. I think it's a good example. Another one is from Britain. I'm trying to make best use of my time. This is about homeless people. This is a investigating journalist who used social media content to understand who is homeless. Homeless people who died on the street unaccompanied for 2 years. But the thing is, those people who died were not newsworthy somehow. And one of them was quite striking, the person thinks. So he decided to dig deeper into it. He wanted to know how many homeless people are there in Britain. But the person couldn't have access to a hygienic data because not many institutions shared data with him. So the person himself launched a form that was filled in by local journalists. Local journalists filled in the form and let him know how many homeless people are there in their neighborhood. This took months and months. And he compared this data with the media and verified certain stories. So this is now beyond data, pure data. It's a life. It's about a life story. And this shows us it's not just one statistic. It's about life. And as a result, a significant amount of budget was created for the homeless people. But eventually it was not really used. But the truth is, considering the tweet contents, all the erroneous content, for example, you die, you don't have, but you have an account, some people attributed a new name to you, or they claim you lived in a wrong neighborhood, and it was not verified. So they created a digital museum. And how they started is based on missing data, and he tried to fill in the data and brought this to the attention of the public. I'll try to wrap up here. This is about how newsworthy lost people are. By the way, some people, when they die, they are more newsworthy, but some people are not. Based on this analysis, they understood that a dead white woman is more newsworthy than a black man. So they reached this conclusion. If you have friends in the US, you can ask them to log on to this link. Are you pressworthy? It's US based. Check this out. This is my last example. There's one more. Actually, this is not an example. This is at the heart of the problem. ProPublica, an investigating journalism platform, that received many awards. And this claims Google supports some companies to stop disinformation, but this serves totally the opposite purpose. And in non-English speaking countries, it's working the opposite way as a result of this analysis. Quite interesting. And this company is strongest in Turkey, actually. So Google is not disturbed at all by the commercial aspect of this. So behind the scenes, this is what's happening, unfortunately. In this big web, some people are quite happy with what's happening. This is the Switzerland example. I'll try to be quick. This is about how a government channel can be used in a systematic way. I mean, this platform analyzes whether they receive support or not. This is CRV data web page. And on that, in a methodical way, we could see all the codes. What is it good for? Transparency, accountability, reuse of data, making it available to everyone, and so on. What is it good for? This is good to prevent disinformation, data pollution. Otherwise, it's a public problem. So this is Brazil example, but I'll skip that because this was about the bots. Bolsonaro made great use of bots to inflate his own ego balloon, which popped. This was a good example. And lastly, Turkey. It's not a project, what you see, it's a research. This is a small sample group and 2,000 pieces of content was in the sample. The websites copied and pasted the same content and published it. So if the data is faulty, it's replicated in a faulty way, in an unbelievable way in this research. There were 130 pieces of authentic news. The rest, out of the 2,000, they were not authentic. All the others were copied and pasted. This is just a small sample size, by the way. It took place in 20 days only. Data collected from only certain websites and only in Tunceli. I mean, that's where you get the best quality news read by people. I was not surprised. This is my political opinion, of course, but the number could go up. So we're supposed to see the following. The mechanism continuously spreads false information. Bitlis, Zonguldak, Artvin, Çanakkale. Somehow, the content of the mainstream media is spread out, even if it's wrong or fake. Let's not just put the blame on them, but they get the news from the same news agency without checking it, without adding anything authentic on it. It's just copied and pasted. This is my suggestions list. You should exercise skepticism. It's not easy to be suspicious, but you should be suspicious. You should be skeptical. You should be visual literate, media literate. You should be able to read and understand data. And you should check verification websites or fact-check websites. You should be suspicious. You should be skeptical. Even me, I'm having difficulties teaching myself that skill. Like Teyit.org is an example website. We should check them out regularly to fact-check. You should do it. It's quite surprising. You will end up seeing quite surprising pieces of information. Quite interesting. You could run some exercises. You should sometimes pause, think before you reshare or repost something. You should just verify it. The most clear message that comes out is people have thought social media would be such an important actor. The news providers usually don't think about its impact on social media, but social media creates a great impact. This is my reference list. It starts with infodemia training. It's prepared by a big group of members of academia. This one on top, highlighted in yellow, it's very important. I took that training and I learned a lot. Thank you very much. And I'd like to finish with this slide. As an analogy to a doctor, doctor could be suspicious of a certain disease. We should treat the news that way. Thank you very much.
Tekrar çok teşekkürler.
Thanks a lot again. So spreading of disinformation and misleading information and fake news, and you considering it as a public health issue, is very valuable. So, do we have any questions from our audience here in the hall or from our online audience participants? Let's pass the mic. Hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for your presentations. Very interesting all. I have two short questions for Mr. Onur. One is about the Botometer. I understand you are using it in Turkey. However, I think it's working in English. How does it work? Does it have automatic translation? This is the first thing I want to ask. The second thing is some verified accounts. You revealed them to be bot accounts, you said. Did you notify Twitter about it, and are they taking any action? The second question is, although politicians have bot accounts, they are engaged in interaction. You talked about the Trump and Republicans example. Is there such a thing for politicians from our country, from Turkey? Because as you work with bots, we want to see how Turkish politicians get engaged through bot accounts. Thank you. First of all, thank you. Botometer has a couple of versions. The most frequently used version is, yes, in English, or for content in English. Then we have the language diagnostic. It's a different model. The language content is not taking into consideration, but it's about network structure, time information, and the analysis of metadata from the interacted accounts. So this model can be used in other languages than English. And especially during the elections period, whereby we work with a lot of data, one of the most important factors is to see how scalable Botometer is, how it can assess a higher number of accounts at the same time. So we have the Botometer Lite, which is a different model that works in a faster manner, and we use that in these analyses for two reasons. One is that for this information, one of the most important criteria is that the accounts might have been deleted during the time of analysis. We gather political content from the data flow. Maybe in 1 month time, a person who made a comment about a politician is already closed by or suspended by Twitter, or maybe deleted by the person themselves. So you cannot have retrospective analysis, but you can come up with some arguments, let's say, through the Botometer. So we have the Botometer Lite, as I said, that is a different version that allows you to do other analysis. This is the technical side of your question about the politicians. One of the reasons why we made the data source an open source is this actually. We want to be able to analyze this type of data. What we analyze currently is to see to what extent the followers are bot accounts. Having high number of followers doesn't necessarily mean that those bot accounts are working in favor or against that account. So you have to check the net communication or interaction with that account. For instance, there are 40 million single followers following the one single politician, but 10 million of them haven't even tweeted once. So these are just bots used to increase the number of followers. So for content-related accounts, we will start doing these. Which accounts are supported by which bots, we will identify this. And on political party basis, we also check that. We also have to check common followers for all political parties. If a certain group wants to make its own politicians, MPs, and followers more visible, are they really getting or buying these followers from bot producers or not? We will be able to see this thanks to these analysis. Until the elections, we are planning to carry out many different analysis, some at network level, some at content level, especially in Turkish increasing the number of followers naturally is very important, because we are missing in terms of the models that work well with the social media. Some companies are producing them for themselves and use it for their own products, but we want to come up with these at an academic level. Our priority is to make sure that we make the data open source and make it sustainable and accessible as much as the Twitter rules allow us. And we also want to make the models open. As I understand, there is an API for the Botometer. You can have access to that through it. But we want to make the language model open as well, so that people can use machine learning to bring their own restrictions, to learn their own restrictions. For instance, for the fact-checking page, tate.org, is it just an allegation or not? You can see it. So people in my team are mostly students and researchers. In the upcoming 5 months, we are totally going to focus on this. We also have projects supported by EU and TÜBİTAK in Turkey. So we want to see a minimum amount of this information during the election periods. Thank you. Yes, please. First of all, thank you so much for the presentations. I have a question for Professor Kerem. Well, for social media to lose its impact or to be seen as a negative media, some political parties and groups are working. So, anything you recommend to turn this negativity into a positive approach? Can you actually come up with a suggestion for a solution? Well, thank you. After I painted you this gloomy picture with this pessimistic approach, I don't know if I can really answer that, but as you know, my field of expertise is law. That's why I always approach things from that perspective. But on the other hand, I am also a human rights activist, as I call myself. So doing something like this in Turkey, at least in the short term, is not possible. Doesn't seem to be possible. As a person who has tried it time and again and who continues to try it. We talked about the YouTube decision from 2015, and then we have the Constitutional Court applications for YouTube and Twitter, as well as Wikipedia. So according to the current provision of the law, we cannot say that in the short run we will be able to find legal remedies for the possible negative implications of this. Well, for the legal amendment, the CHP at that time brought the issue, the disinformation provision, to the Constitutional Court, but most probably we won't get a result out of that. If that's the case, then, as mentioned by other speakers, we might use the methods and tools referred by them, but we can also use the tools of democratic organization to see what we can do outside of the sphere of law to fight against this silencing. Yes, on one hand we have this oppression and pressure that is silencing people, but then on the other hand, despite all these court cases and compensation decisions, there are still new decisions rendered by the courts. It means that people are still thirsty for hearing the truth, for freedom of expression. In Turkey, we have people who are exercising journalism profession with limited resources, like Duvar, Diken, I don't even have to mention their names, but the fact that they have such high number of followers despite all the negative things and high oppression, it shows that there is a potential there. I can't suggest you a solution, as I said, because it's not my field of expertise, but the gloomy picture I painted is there, but there is also a huge potential created by the same thing. So let me shed a slow light against this darkness that I painted. Yes, we have one more question.
Interesting presentations. My question goes to Pinar Hanım. In many European countries and also other countries in the world, the majority of disinformation messages and bots and other things can be traced back to Russia. Is Turkey also a playing field for targeted disinformation from Russia or maybe also from China?
Teşekkürler.
Thank you so much. Well, of course, it's important to give a detailed answer to your question, but somehow it impacts what you say. But we need data to be able to trace it back. We need some research. I don't know what to say, actually, exactly. I don't know how to respond, so maybe it will be an unclear answer, but I think we need data to support this, so I can't give you an exact answer for the time being. I think there is time for one more question. Yes, please. Hello, everyone. This is Attila. First of all, thank you for your nice presentations. My question is for Mr. Onur. Elon Musk, after he purchased Twitter, he said to fight against hate speech, and as he is obsessed with freedom of speech, he talked about something like freedom of reach. So this hate speech will be prevented, he said. Instead of removing it, he said it will be prevented. So in literature, you check the dissemination patterns for disinformation. So although I do not support Elon Musk and such a policy, restricting freedom of speech, I was just wondering, would it give us an idea about the dissemination of disinformation on Twitter? Can we really use this in fighting against disinformation? Thank you. Well, I can say that all of the technological systems have this problem. If someone wants to manipulate these systems in one way or the other, they try to find different means. For instance, we talk about the right to be forgotten. The social bots might use this in their own advantage with Botometer. If you want to get your hands on the last 200 tweets by that account, you can't get all the 1,000 tweets that were actually shared by this post and then deleted later on. Maybe the bot account tweets were deleted. We don't know this, but with the new practice, we can say that there will definitely be actors who will try to manipulate the system, but it's only because of the nature of this. Whenever you have a system gap, people want to benefit from this, and we have to develop mechanisms to identify this. That's how we try to prevent these. It's not something that can be solved easily. Elon Musk buying Twitter, for instance, opened the possibilities for many, many things. Right before the panel, we were talking about it. For instance, the Associated Press account was hacked on Twitter by a group, and they tweeted a few years ago that there was an explosion in the White House and President Obama was injured. Within 30 seconds, this continued to spread on Twitter because imagine a credible news agency like Associated Press was posting this. So trading bots that trade automatically created a huge decrease in the stock exchange because of these bot accounts, but within a short period of time, as 2 minutes, the White House declared, made a statement denying this, but still there was this loss created. So Elon Musk buying Twitter and its implications on the stock exchange. Would certain things be delayed? Would loss of money could be prevented? So time will tell this. In Nature magazine, there was an important study, interesting study that was published. The impact is low, but certain manipulations are possible, according to this study. 60 million people were subject to this experiment. What they do is that on Facebook, they use this button, I voted button in Facebook. So as a control group, they check people who use the I voted button within a small group of people, 600,000 people. Next to that button, they also tell people that your friend such and such voted also. Just seeing those names really increases significantly the likelihood of voting for that account holder. When they see their friends have voted, they also want to go and vote. So if Facebook is doing this, we also have the following question. There are certain swing states in US, right? And you might guess the political opinion or tendencies of the Facebook users in those states, and maybe you can use this mechanism for them. So technological systems might also create some problems, and we have to be aware of these problems. In Musk, there is a shift to this. As an alternative to Twitter, now at Mastodon, you have one server that is controlled entirely by one single entity. You can't, they can't say that they are not going to be dependent on someone else. They might create some sub-instances where extremities are spreading. So every system has its weaknesses, and the most important thing is to see to what extent we can really foresee the weaknesses and get preventive measures. Maybe we can get another question, but okay, I want to ask a final question then to Professor Kerem. In your presentation, you talked about some laws and legislations. What do they mean for critical media and critical people? I know that they are implemented strictly for people who criticize the relevant government authorities, but we also have people and entities that on purpose spread hate speech, targeting human rights advocates and dissidents. So all the laws and legislations you listed, none of them are being used against these entities that spread hate speech. Would it be possible to work this? Let me give you an example about this. We had this very strategic case, the right example for what you said. If you would remember, in 2017 in Büyükada, the Princess Island, a huge group of human rights activists were detained. At that time, an MP from the governing party, ruling party, alleged that there were incredible crimes, and people from the ruling party or pro-government people immediately pressed charges on multiple accounts, and they succeeded. But we tried the following, although we knew it would fail, but we tried a method. About certain newspapers, retraction, content removal, blocking access, pressing charges, and civil court cases were brought. For certain newspapers, we did this. Certain newspapers, for 2 human rights defenders, and I won't give their names, not to put them as a target again. The same newspaper, for instance, for one person, one of the human rights defenders, in less than a month, they covered 25 separate news articles calling the person a terrorist, traitor, collaborator. So, pressing charges for content removal were rejected one by one for each 25 accounts. But we also brought a civil action saying that this person is not a celebrity. Yes, there is public interest here, but why are you covering the same news again and again every day by violating the presumption of innocence? And then the court said freedom of expression. Both courts said freedom of expression. For all cases we brought against the court for 20 different accounts, they said the same thing. This is still a pending case. We are waiting for the decision, but it's very, very difficult. Today, again, I saw in the account of a dissident, he was blatantly insulted, but then the person who insults him didn't mention him, so the judge, the prosecutor said the benefit of the doubt for the accused applies, so they didn't issue a penalty. The problem is that there is a one-way traffic all around the world and in Turkey. But then there could be a certain balance created by these problems. However, the criminal law system in Turkey and other sanctions systems are totally having the intent of abuse. When they enact the laws, the whole purpose is to abuse the other party so that there will only be one side implementation. Anything said against Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, if you say the same things against a minister, let alone Mr. Erdogan, you immediately run the risk of getting arrested. I'm not even talking about Mr. Demirtas. So unfortunately, here is a huge inequality and imbalance. And one final remark, both the Constitutional Court and the European Court of Human Rights, we filed cases, by the way, to these courts. We have some pending applications. We also say that this is the violation of non-discrimination right, because if the same statement is made by a pro-government people, it's considered as freedom of expression. If the same statement is made by a dissident person, then it immediately falls under the criminal law sanctions. That's why I say the shrinking civic space, and we no longer have this civic space for public debates. But the procedures in the European Court take too long that even if we get a result one day, it will be too late. Yes, Onur Varol has a question for you. Hello, Professor Kerem. After the panel, we will be able to talk to Pınar. That's why I have a question for you. I was just wondering, you gave some examples, but before the question, maybe I can say the following. Same statements made against different people, you said, might end in different results. Data journalism also encompasses activism, but can activists determine this, identify this on a systematic basis, test this, make the same statements against one person and another person, saying that there is such and such bias in practice by the courts, for instance? What kind of an idea would this be? What do you think about this? And the second thing is scanning websites and news sources, and is the work of some specifically founded law offices, the civil law offices that are established just for this purpose, to scan the social media accounts and press charges against people. So if this is repeated on a systematic basis, maybe it's preventing the law from being implemented, maybe they're trying to find the loopholes in the law. So what do you think about these people? What are your observations against such people? Are there any sanctions brought against them? Okay, let me say the following. Very recently, just a few days ago, in a case pending in the Ankara courthouse, I was actually defending my client against one of these law officers that opened these cases. The court asked for the following. By the way, unfortunately, it's very difficult to make the court accept this, but we will go all the way. We said, how many court cases are opened by these law officers? Please ask the clerks through a letter how many court cases have been opened by these people, how many charges were pressed against, and how many court cases were brought in front of the court for the same news article. Because for the same news article, they sue 30 different people. So it's very difficult for a person to read the comments of 1,500 single followers and allege that there is suffering because of this. I think the most healthy data can be collected by the court, but the court denied our demand. In the next phase, we will take action against the denial of the court. Yes, reports are written. However, we also have to emphasize that if you are not going to win in the end, bringing an action is a costly thing. There are 40,000 cases of defamation brought up against the President of the Republic. It means that the person, the lawyer, will actually represent 40,000 people. Maybe they will charge 5,000 lira per case. So imagine, you know that you will lose in the end, but you cannot sue the other party. One party is winning and the other party is not even able to sue because there is a cost to be paid if you lose. So collecting this data is extremely hard. Processing the data is difficult as well, but we might try these things. Going back to your first question, let me share some data with you. Here in our Association for Freedom of Expression, we gather a lot of data and try to use them in strategic cases. For online news portals, in one of them, there was a news covered, actually 34 news covered against the president and his family, and they were banned. So we have been applying to the Constitutional Court to remove the ban of blocking access. The Constitutional Court always renders the decisions for other court cases, but never rendering decisions about these cases. So intentionally they are not taking a decision. That's why we will apply to the European Court of Human Rights. We have 30 pending cases from 2005 and they're all related to this issue. So it means that they failed to take a decision. So you talked about using data for journalism, but in terms of activism and from the legal practice perspective, these are usable data. So we have the chance to ask the court, why are you concluding many cases but not this one? So we're trying to come up with some remedies. We are trying to find remedies in terms of these entities that are controlling and sanctioning access to internet, but it's like trying to dig a well by using a small spoon. I know this is a crazy effort, but we are open for all solutions. We are trying to find a way. Sometimes expert information is very meaningful for us, to be able to say, look, this is the situation in Turkey. You have to be able to collecting the data in the right manner. It's not only important for journalism, but it's also critical from a legal perspective. Maybe I didn't answer any of the questions clearly, but these are things that we always ask ourselves as well. Okay, there's a question from one of our online participants. The disinformation law, is there a chance that the Constitutional Court will cancel it? Well, on other occasions, I also said the same thing. The Constitutional Court has 15 members, 12 of them appointed by the President and 3 appointed by the majority in the Parliament. So let's not trust the Constitutional Court that much, because the majority of the members now are appointed by the President himself. So until 2023, this law will not be passed by the Constitutional Court, and then the President will change. And if there will be a legal transformation, it should be a structural one, including the Constitutional Court. So this law, as long as it fulfills the mission for the government, it will never be revoked or cancelled by the Constitutional Court. At least there is zero chance of it being cancelled until the elections. But I don't know if things change in favor of the opposition, and if the Constitutional Court wants to give a message to the world, maybe things will change, but to be realistic, I don't think so. We shouldn't be hopeful in the short run. Thank you so much. With that, let's close this panel. Thank you so much to all your panelists for the information you shared with us. We would like to thank you here and online participants, and thank you for your questions. Good evening.